Hey there, welcome to the DFS Build NBA edition. I'm Kevin Roberts, joined with Taylor Smith. We're getting ready to go over this 9-game main slate over at DraftKings for NBA DFS. I really combined those words together just now. Anyways, the goal is to help you win. We go over all the top plays, in our opinion, and also looking at projections. And we also factor in ownership and matchups and all that fun stuff. Hopefully it helps you out. If it does, hit the like button if you like free advice. Also subscribe to the channel so you get more videos just like this. We also cover NFL and MLB when it is in season. We also have a Discord, so hit the link either in our YouTube channel or in this video just below us, and you can come in and join the community. And everything is free currently, so come in and benefit from all that. And if we help you win it all, you can also drop a super thanks by hitting the tab below this video if you feel so obliged. All right, let's get to it. We go position by position. Let's start up top. Well, Trae Young is not a part of this anymore, so let's get rid of him. He has already been ruled out, so that obviously is going to create a lot of opportunity for other Hawks, and they're also missing other guys anyways, with Jalen Johnson being ruled out, and I think you said DeAndre Hunter is also out now. So, yeah, lots of usage to go around with Atlanta. Kind of reminds you of last night with Philly. Paul George, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey all being out, and we, against our better judgment, we played Reggie Jackson. So, obviously, that didn't go well. And certainly people will be a little bit afraid of that scenario coming again tonight. But the reality is that's a ton of usage going out the window, and it's one of the best possible matchups you can ask for against the Bulls. So before we go into the top plays here, how do you think you want to navigate that situation?
Unregister contests and try again tomorrow, probably. I think so. They're without Young, they're without Johnson, they're without Hunter, they're without Reese-Shea. I assume Keaton Wallace is going to be the point guard now. They don't have Kobe Buffkin either out for the season, so I'm assuming it's Keaton Wallace, and he's probably minimum price, and he's probably going to play a ton, and he's going to have to handle the ball. It's disgusting, but
Reggie season.
They don't have anyone else that can play point guard tonight, unless you count Vit Krejci once again.
No. I mean, I like him now, obviously.
Is not a point guard. Dyson Daniels is not really a point guard either. They just don't have point of attack offensive players tonight against Chicago. I assume Daniels is a good play at 7,100. It's a bit of a steep salary to pay for him, but pace of the game should suit him well. I think Keaton Wallace is probably your core play here, though, at 3K flat. Just like he has to play a ton. I assume he's going to start. It's pretty disgusting. I think Vit Krejci is also viable by default. Beyond that, I don't really know what they do at guard. Like Garrison Matthews is going to have to play a ton. He's 3-3. Okay. Like I don't feel good about Garrison Matthews ever, but 27 minutes last night without Johnson and without Hunter, possibly 30 plus with Young joining them out tonight and Reese-Shea. Like all three of those guys are viable by default.
100%. I think we can kind of lean on past usage rate to a certain degree, and for the most part, maybe just per minute rate. Like if guys are really shitty performers like Garrison Matthews, then maybe lean towards somebody who is a little bit more reliable. I mean, I'm down for Keaton Wallace at 3K just because if he starts, he's going to play a ton of minutes in a really, really good DFS environment. So all these guys, if they're going to play, they're kind of going to just luck into like the best possible situation. And we know minutes are currency in DFS. So if these guys are out there in this spot, I'm just going to do it. Like, okay, the difference here, by the way, between some of these guys and last night with Philly, number one, Philly was facing OKC. That's a pretty vast difference compared to facing Chicago. The other thing is Reggie Jackson is dusty as hell, and for no reason, he decided to not even give a shit and wasn't even trying. 5 turnovers. What do you take? Like 5 shots all night. So it was just weird. It was a weird situation. A bunch of the other Philly guys still worked just because of lack of bodies. And then they only gave Reggie 17 minutes because he was terrible. So it doesn't feel amazing, but I think once we update projections and everything, all these guys are going to look really, really good and for good reason. So Dyson Daniels already looks good, but with no Trae, he's going to look like one of the best plays of the slate at only 7.1K. One thing we were talking about before we went live here, though, is the fact that, or you actually said it, Dyson Daniels is not really like a primary ball handler kind of guy. I kind of relate it to like the Jalen Suggs thing when like he was like the guy for Orlando. But the positive there is that he is a good shooter and he's going to be out there a ton. So he's going to get more volume just naturally. So I think that kind of negates any concern there. We'll just see how it goes, I guess. But right now, I think the Hawks seem fairly necessary. I was already heading towards a stars and scrubs build on this slate because there was initially some pretty good value, but now it's like obviously that is the chalky build, and I think I'm okay with that. When last night I really wasn't, but now I am. All right, let's keep it going though, because obviously we'll talk ourselves in circles about that. There's really not much more to add. With no Trey, LaMelo is now the top spend at point guard. He has a 54-point fantasy projection, not carrying that much ownership currently, but obviously with Trae Young out, that's going to change. One of the best matchups you can ask for against the Jazz. I love LaMelo Ball here, and now with no Trae, I feel like if you're not loving somebody in the mid-range like Ja Morant, who I do really like, I think LaMelo feels like a very easy click today.
Yeah, he's going to be mega chalk now. I'm certain, like facing Utah, shorthanded Utah, who's already bad defensively, even when they're not shorthanded. 10K flat, like too cheap for him. He's averaging like 1.5 points per minute this season. I don't really see any reason to not love him other than the ownership. There are quite a few stars on this slate. It's a Jokic slate, it's a Giannis slate, it's a Wemby slate. So, but there's a lot of value. I mean, now there's value at point guard, where earlier the value was at center. So I feel like people are going to pay up for Trae, pay up for LaMelo, and now it's a bit different. So we'll see how it goes. But it's hard to imagine LaMelo not being mega chalk now.
Yeah, 100% agree. So I don't know if you have to get away from that. It's kind of like a couple nights ago when it was like a maxi slate, and it's been like this every slate. There's like the Anthony Edwards slate, there was the SGA slate. Sometimes it's going to work out, sometimes it's not. I feel like this is definitely a spot where we should just eat the chalk and pay for LaMelo. But if you don't want to, Tyrese Maxey, if he's in at 9.4K, he is there with the second best projection against the Knicks. I'm not personally feeling that because if I don't want LaMelo, I would rather just go even further. DeJounte Murray projects pretty well at 8.4K. All these other guys are kind of too cheap. Jalen Brunson, CJ McCollum is projecting pretty well. Ja Morant's projection is not really good, but Ja Morant's price is. I really, really like Ja Morant. If you're only listening to projections, that's totally fair. But I guess if projections are not going to promote Ja Morant as a really good play and he's going to be contrarian, he's one of my favorite tournament plays of the slate.
Yeah, I like those Pelicans with no Zion and no Ingram. No Herb Jones. I know it's a back-to-back, but pretty good spot against Dallas, shorthanded Dallas without Lively and Luka. So McCollum's the one that really pops on this slate from a point per dollar standpoint. I think DeJounte is okay. Dyson Daniels is going to get more steamed up, so I assume he might surpass McCollum in terms of popularity, but still like McCollum quite a bit. Van Vliet, same story, same price as McCollum. Not going to get owned at all on this slate, but I think the Rockets are in a really good spot against Denver. Denver playing the second half of back-to-back, third game in 4 days. Denver's not a great defense to begin with. So we're not quite to my favorite play from the Rockets, but I still think Van Vliet is viable.
Yeah, sure. Totally. Just trying to see if there's anybody else that really stands out. Like there are other guys, but the matchups are not, super, super exciting or the situations
Keontae George is playing. Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson, John Collins, Lowry Markkanen are all out. Mm-hmm. I know Keontae's been out for a few games with a heel injury, but he's 5'5". He's right. I think a second year player. I don't think he'll be super limited. They can't really afford to limit him. They just are out of bodies. So I think he and Collier are still viable with Sexton missing this game. They're both just going to have to play a ton of minutes as really the only guards left standing for Utah. And Svi is also there, but not really a point guard.
Yeah, earlier today, Collier was like one of my favorite core plays at 5K. He smashed his last time out. Obviously, all these key bodies for Utah not being there makes him that. If Keontae's in, I'm like a little bit less interested in him, especially with the Keaton Wallace thing and like whatever else might open up. But you're 100% right. At 5K, that is a little bit too cheap for a guy who's probably going to have a prominent role still. He's still going to start. Whether he starts alongside Keontae George or not remains to be seen. But I agree. And Keontae, if we can have faith that he's not going to be limited, there's no reason. I know Utah seems to be tanking here, but there's no reason for them to not play their young guys like a full allotment of minutes if they're okay to go. So Keontae at 5.5, 100% is very, very appealing. If no limit, I would definitely prefer him over Collier for sure. But as I was saying, like some of these other guys like Brunson, Steph, Dame, you could use them in tournaments. They're tournament plays, but they're not like appealing tournament plays. I would much rather play Ja Morant with a not so appealing projection as opposed to those guys. But it's going to be interesting because, as you said, you can use Dyson Daniels at shooting guard, but you have Daniels, you have Keaton, you have the Jazz guys, and then you have like LaMelo. Like, it's going to be really interesting to see who ends up going overlooked. Could it just be the Pels guys that you're talking about? Very possible, but we'll have to see how it plays out. Josh Giddey could be a little bit interesting if the Bulls, some of the other Bulls guards end up missing. I think 3 of them were listed as questionable. You said, is Dosunmu already out, or is he the one you said is in?
He's questionable, but I expect him to play.
Okay. Well, they did play yesterday, so I would not be shocked if he does end up sitting because he's been
They
missing
already
time.
said essentially that he's playing tonight.
Oh, okay.
That's why I didn't think he was going to play last night. He didn't.
Okay. Well, we'll see what happens. But if Lonzo or Kobe, who's also questionable, if those guys miss, then Giddey would look a lot better at 7.3, and his projection would spike. Right now, I thought at 7.5, but I don't think he's in play currently. But the matchup with the Hawks is obviously awesome. So if 1 or 2 of those guys miss, he would look a lot better. Chris Paul looks pretty good at 6.1. Don't have a problem with him in a really good DFS environment. Memphis plays really fast. We talked about a lot of these other guys. Vit Krejci, point guard eligible. Gotta love it. I mean, I've been like slamming Krejci for days now. He just keeps hitting for some reason. And the nice thing is extra usage, really good matchup, and the price is really not budged. 4K is not bad. He's a very thin play in general. If he's not hitting his shots, he's not going to hit. But he's actually like done other shit lately. He had 6 assists last night. Like he's doing stuff when he's out there beyond just scoring. So I don't hate him. I don't think he feels as thin as usual, given the injuries to the Hawks. You can play the Minnesota point guard roulette with Mike Conley and Dante DiVincenzo. I don't think it's necessary on this slate. In theory, Dante has the ceiling to keep going after, but if he's not going to like consistently close games, like has happened to me twice now that I've played him, then I don't really want to take that dive on a 9-game slate. 9-game slates are about upside and also like not fucking missing. Like you can't miss on a 9-game slate. You have to have basically a perfect lineup. Unless you're doing like a really, really big single entry where there's a little bit more room for error. You see anybody else here down low, like another punt that maybe is going under the radar or a mid-range guy that nobody's on?
Drew Holiday and Pritchard are like okay to have in a player pool, but nowhere close to priorities.
Oh, Stephon Castle. No Sohan again. Stephon Castle. No, he's point guard. Right here.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, so now that he's point guard and shooting guard eligible, a little bit more interesting, but he looks awesome. He's a core play for me at the moment. Obviously, the Hawks news could end up changing that, and it just depends what you want to do, because the annoying thing is, yeah, there's a lot of great value at point guard, but there's also really good spend ups at point guard and shooting guard. So, like, you just have to make some decisions there as you're building, or just trust the projections. But Castle does look really good. He had a career high in points last time out, and he started. So if he's starting again at 4K in this fast-paced environment, I like him quite a bit.
Noted.
All right, cool. So over to shooting guard we go. Nice thing is, if Dyson Daniels is popping like he should, you can also use him there. Anthony Edwards leads the way with the best projection among shooting guards with 48 fantasy points. I don't have a problem with him. He's not going to be owned. The Warriors do not provide like the most comforting matchup. So he just doesn't feel like a priority for me, but at 9.2K, the price is good. The matchup is good. I don't have a problem. The only issue is you can get Jalen Green at a similar projection for like 2K less. I think I would just keep playing Jalen Green there instead. There's also Jaylen Brown, who his projection is not that far away, and he's like $1,000 cheaper. Amen Thompson continues to be a pretty palatable price. I think if you're going Amen versus Jalen is the better play. You're saving $700, but Amen is still in. Excuse me, Amen is still very much in play. Honestly, shooting guard's freaking loaded, man. CJ McCollum 7.3. The only guy here that like I absolutely don't want would be Kyrie if he is in. I would imagine he would be a decent candidate to not play after playing last night, but people could still be drawn to him because the Pels are a good matchup and he would have good usage with no Luka. Everybody else here, though, in the top like 5 or 6 in projections, obviously add Daniels in there too. They all look great, and I wouldn't fault you for playing any of them.
Yeah, I would add Paul George to that. I assume he's going to play after sitting last night. The Knicks are a better matchup than the Thunder were yesterday for the Sixers. Without Embiid, he's quite a bit better than he is with Embiid, as we've seen in recent games. So 8,100 still a little bit light for him in that role, assuming he's in. I think you can add Svi to the list as a value at 4K. Just his usage is through the roof this season. Utah without several rotation pieces. Someone's got to shoot. He's been happy to do it. Not a safe play, but as a straight line pivot from Castle, who might be super owned, I don't hate that at all. I don't think Castle is like a super safe play in his own right. Cheap enough to play, of course, without Sohan. I think the best play here is Vassell. In that Memphis game, 6K flat, just playing a much bigger role now, no longer limited. The Grizzlies play fast, like we talked about. Guard forward eligible, so you can play him in the maximum number of spots. It's very hard for me to get away from him. I assume he's going to be chalky, maybe less so now with this Atlanta stuff, but he and Jalen Green are the pretty clear standouts at shooting guard now.
Shout out to Vassell, helped me get that big win the other day, thanks to the projections. It's true. Vassell looks great. I got nothing to add there. Him and CP3 both remain good. And Castle, it's just going to be like which one or two guys there are going to hit. And I agree, Castle is volatile for sure. Just a good value. I don't mind the Svi call at all. If he's going to get that much usage and all these other guys for the Jazz are going to be out, that's totally fine. The nice thing, though, I do not think ownership is even a factor today. I think maybe you could look at, like, if there's blatant ownership, just don't eat that chalk if it's not something you like are super on board with. Like, for some reason, if you don't like the volatility that LaMelo possesses, just go do something else today, because nothing else really matters as far as ownership is concerned. There are so many good plays, so many ways to go, that I just think it's not going to matter. Like, you don't need to go out of your way to get different on this slate. 9 games is 9 games, man.
We should also mention Bogdanovic. Like,
sure.
I don't really understand why he's not on the injury report, since he's an old man playing in the second half of back-to-back after being questionable last night. But, you know, if he plays, I assume he's semi-full from a minute standpoint, and he's going to get much of the use for Atlanta. Like, that's one guy who's certainly not afraid to let it fly. He's under 5K. He's a shooting guard, small forward, just like Vassell. If he's in, I think Bogdanovic is pretty good too.
Yeah, I don't fully trust that he wouldn't be limited, and I wouldn't be that shocked if he ends up getting ruled out. But yeah, if we could actually have faith in Boggy at 4.3K against the Bulls, 100%, he looks good, no doubt about it. Any interest in Dick?
No.
Well, I'll just note Dick is 4.5K. He was getting it going last game. It was really good after 3 quarters. Or after 2.5 quarters or so, then didn't see like the fourth quarter, so he bombed out. Obviously, matchup with the Celtics is not great, but no Emmanuel quickly, so I would personally keep him in my player pool. Working our way down here. I guess if Kyrie is out, Quentin Grimes at 5K would be appealing enough against the Pels. I wouldn't hate that. Buddy Hield has been starting. What's the situation with the Warriors and their lineup? Let's see here. Yeah, Kuminga remains out. Draymond is still questionable. TJD is questionable. Podziemski remains out. I don't know. I guess if he starts, he's viable, but I don't think we have to do that. Anybody else down here that you see that you feel compelled to call out?
No.
Okay.
Jordan Hawkins
here. Yeah, with no Zion and Herbert Jones out. Is Jordan Hawkins still 3K?
Yep.
Yeah, so that is a good call. If we can feel pretty good about his minutes, he should be on your radar. All right, over at small forward, we have Jason Tatum leading the way with a 55-point fantasy projection. That's pretty hefty, and a matchup against the Raptors will do that to you. He's only 10.2K. Boston is at full strength, which is not a spot that I like to target them at, but Tatum is in play and probably going to go super overlooked because he's in the same price range as guys like Cat and LaMelo. So, with all the value, you just never know, but I would imagine Tatum is going to be fairly unowned. Below him is Jaylen Brown. Ahmed Thompson's probably the play here for me at 7.8K if you're going to pay up at small forward. Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett with no quickly, they're okay. If you want to play Celtics guys and you want to do a run back, I don't hate it. They do project, decently. There's nothing wrong with it. Nobody else here really stands out. Paul George, maybe Trey Murphy too. Trey Murphy has been doing really, really well. Has good usage rate with no Zion or Herb there. Obviously no Ingram too. So I think he's in play at 7.4K. Kind of think I prefer Amen and or Jalen Green in that same price range. Same thing with Paul George. Obviously, if Paul George is out with Embiid out, he gets a boost. So I agree with you. He looks okay. Levine's projection is kind of low for facing the Hawks. What do you think about Levine?
He's fine. He's just kind of expensive. He'll look better if Kobe White is out, but don't really see a need to prioritize him. I assume Chicago is just going to murder them now. So not super geeked about the Bulls unless they have missing bodies.
Yeah, especially at small forward here. I just think there's a bunch of other guys that I rattled off that look better at the moment. Of those guys up top, which one do you like the most? I'm sure it's Amen, but have at it.
It's Paul George if he's in. Amen looks pretty good too. Jaylen Brown, I don't hate either. Like no one's going to play him. They're playing the Raptors. I think that's a really good spot for Boston.
For sure.
They've kind of been playing down to people lately. The Raptors have been a little bit friskier. So Brown and Tatum, I think, are really good unowned spends on this slate.
Yeah, they look like awesome tourney plays for sure.
I also like Josh Hart quite a bit. Like I know we're paying a premium, but just the minutes for him are insane. He's good per minute. The game should be decently competitive if those Sixers play after not playing last night. I don't think he's a bad way to spend money. He's essentially a very similar play to Amen Thompson, just a guy who can kind of rack up all sorts of stats. So don't mind either of them. But Vassell, again, like I mentioned at shooting guard, he's probably the best play at small forward, and then Bogdanovich gets a big boost as well.
Yeah, Hart with a nice 51-point fantasy outing with a triple-double last time he played the Sixers. So he's very much like Amen Thompson for sure. So I like that comparison. If Amen's going to be chalky by any chance, certainly that would be an opportunity for you to pivot if you wanted to do that. If we would go down here lower, Bryce Sensabaugh at 4.5K looks pretty good, like pretty good value there at small forward and power forward if you want to do that. I have no problem with that. Keldon Johnson also looks really good with no Sohan. He gets really good usage and is a solid per minute guy off the bench for them. So honestly, Spurs just in general, it's a really good DFS spot with the fast-paced Grizzlies team. So I don't mind him either. If Bryce is going to be mega chalk and you don't want to play both of them, you can pivot to Keldon here, and he's going to be, almost half the ownership. So that is certainly interesting. But then like you get Boggy being thrown into the equation, just like I'm telling you, the ownership is not going to matter that much on this slate. Maybe just highlight the 1 to 4 guys who are carrying like monster ownership and just pick your spots like where you just full out fade. I guess if Cody Williams starts, he's worth mentioning at 4.2. Same with Jade McDaniels. He always starts. He's 4.5, gets a lot of minutes. I don't feel great about those guys and don't think they're super necessary. But I would just probably keep them in my pool for value. Then you do have Reza Shea. Is that how you say his name?
Reza Shea is out.
Reza Shea. He's out?
Yes.
Okay, you said that earlier. Okay. So that's interesting. So okay, don't play him. Don't play him. Cam Whitmore is an okay punt at 3.8K with no Tari Eason or Jabari Smith. I don't think we need him on this slate, but he is an interesting tourney punt that I don't think will be owned. And then you already mentioned Svi. Any other punts down here that you feel good about?
Just Matthews, I guess, from a minute standpoint at 3.3 is just like someone you're going to want to play, I assume.
In the vein of Reggie Jackson, no way. No, I agree. Obviously, if he's going to get a lot of burn against the Bulls, it's hard to ignore that. All right, over to power forward we go. You can obviously still use Tatum and some of these other guys there, but Giannis is the top guy in terms of raw projection, 61 points, and he's not garnering ownership. Don't think that's going to hold with all the value here. Any and all studs that you like will probably be owned to a certain degree. I think it'll be interesting to see which 1 or 2 aren't owned though, because not all of them can be mega chalk. So I think right now Tatum, like you were kind of alluding to, is probably the guy that first is going to fly under the radar, because when you have all these extra funds, what do? You go pay all the way up. So people are going to be looking at Jokic, Wemby, Giannis. Those are the first 3 guys people are going to go to, and for good reason. I like them too, but just keep that in mind. So Giannis looks great here in general, and by the way, I don't really want Giannis because the Magic are a shitty matchup. But last time he played the Magic, he went absolutely bonkers, dude. What did he get, like 70 or 80 fantasy points? He's averaged 65 against them on the year. He had 74 against them, and he had 73 last night. So Giannis is matchup proof. It's not really a spot I want to target him in, and there's other studs to look at. But he's got the best projection at power forward. So starting there, what's your interest with Giannis, and are there any other guys here that stand out?
Yeah, I have interest in Giannis. They say he's probable. I'm always kind of nervous about Milwaukee on back-to-backs because they always, come up with some bullshit to sit guys out. But if he's in, it's fine. I think it's not something necessarily to prioritize, but coming in over the field, if he's going to be under-owned compared to like Wemby, whoever else on the high end, LaMelo, Giannis is always someone you can play, especially with power forward eligibility coming in handy. I just updated projections to try to get this Atlanta thing. David Roddy at 3K flat is someone who might have to play 20 plus minutes, and he's 3K flat. So
hey, I don't hate that. David Roddy has had some good games in the past. He's not the worst per minute guy.
Yeah, like, would you rather play David Roddy or Garrison Matthews?
David Roddy, 100%.
Yeah, especially since Garrison Matthews occupies a guard spot. But I guess you can play him at forward too. But
that's a good point too, because honestly, there's just because when I was initially doing my build before the Hawks news, I was like, wow, I don't have enough guard spots because like a lot of the good value is at guard.
It's a problem.
Yeah.
Another one we haven't talked about obviously yet is Jonathan Isaac, because Goga's out, Mo Wagner's out, Franz Wagner's out for Orlando. Like, they're thin on forward/centers, so it's going to be essentially Isaac and Wendell Carter. Isaac played a lot in the last game when Tristan De Silva went out ill after like a minute and a half. But I still think without Goga, like, that's a huge vacancy from the lineup. He's played a ton. He's played a big role ever since their injuries mounted. So Isaac, a really good per minute guy. The issue with him is always the minutes, but okay enough for the dollar. Like, he's under 4K. I think I feel a bit more confident in him than I would in David Roddy, just because he's more of an established commodity, but both are fine values. I'm curious to see where the ownership will go once that updates, because Isaac was going to be pretty chalky, but I'm not sure that'll be the case anymore. So if he flies under the radar, I think it's interesting. Ditto for Keldon Johnson. He was a core play for me in the morning, but he's kind of fallen by the wayside with all this other shit hitting the fan, but still a really strong play. Small forward, power forward. Great matchup we've mentioned against Memphis. Same thing with Sensabaugh. I assume his ownership will come down. Utah just super thin. He's happy to get usage without all the other guys in there. Mentioned Tatum, mentioned Josh Hart. Harrison Barnes, another shitty spur you can try, but not my favorite thing in the world.
I do not think that's necessary, but I agree that he'll get
definitely not necessary.
No.
Yeah. I think Banchero is also interesting. I kind of tried this with Zion last night. Like, Paolo's been insane when healthy this season. He's averaging like 1.6 points per minute. He almost had a triple-double in 27 minutes in the last game.
His usage rates.
I know. His usage is through the roof without Franz and Suggs and Goga.
Yeah.
So, like, he's super limited in theory, but if he plays, I tried this, like I said, last night with Zion, who's been limited to 28 minutes, but like, what if he gets to 30 or 32? I'd rather be in on that before the field is than be last or there with the field. Like, Zion was unowned last night.
Yeah.
This is a similar situation with Paolo where he's going to be unowned, but even at 9K in 30 minutes, he can still get there. So if you have money to spend and you're looking for a way to get different, I think he's certainly playable against Milwaukee.
Yeah, he's playable. I don't think it's like super necessary because of his price and it's 9 games, but I will say in just 26 minutes, the last time he faced the Bucks, he had 54 fantasy points. So now he's projected for 31, maybe
certainly
more.
Not
like you
necessary. It's just like a YOLO kind of thing. Like, he should 100%. Be in your player pool if you're entering a lot of lineups. I think probably wouldn't do it. I would maybe do it in single entry if I'm feeling ballsy, but
feeling extra saucy over there, Taylor.
And we should mention Yabusele with Embiid and Drummond out at 5.5 is okay.
I think Drummond might be in though.
No, he is not. He is out.
And okay, he is
Bobby
out. Right.
Portis again. Chris Middleton demoted to the bench. Portis is okay enough. Good per minute guy. Just kind of a tournament dart throw.
By the way, Keontae is officially in. I don't know if we knew that for sure. I don't know. Whatever. Okay, on we go to center. Obviously, there's more value to talk about, but we can't talk about everybody. Nikola Jokic leads the way with a 63-point fantasy projection. I wouldn't really pay much attention to his ownership here. He's going to be owned for sure. He was going to be flying under the radar a bit because obviously Wemby's on the slate and there's just a ton of guys and we didn't know about that value, but now that it exists, he's going to be owned. No problem with Jokic. I prefer Wemby just because he's $1,000 cheaper and the projection's similar. And he has a massive ceiling. I mean, those three guys, I think one of them might be kind of necessary, maybe even two. Who knows how the slate's going to go. But I'm probably going to go like LaMelo Wemby, like a build like that, and see where it goes from there. But if you want to play Jokic, that's totally fine. He projects well like he does every other. It's a day that ends in Y, so Jokic looks good. All those guys look good. Cat is going to go like majorly overlooked with no Embiid there to stop him. I don't know who the hell is going to stop Cat against. Yeah, so Cat looks really good. Very interesting tournament play at only 10.1K. He remains forever too cheap for whatever reason. Obviously, the presence of Brunson, all these other Knicks guys who play a ton of minutes and love to shoot, could always eat into him, but he just looks really, really good here. Is he a priority for me? No, I think it's going to be Wemby or Jokic, but he looks good and he's not going to be owned. Şengün looks okay. The price is really nice. Don't really love playing guys against Jokic. Obviously, foul trouble would be a concern there, but he projects well. So if you want to play Şengün at no ownership and at a discounted price, this is probably a decent time to do that. Vooch against the Hawks, he looks good. He's too cheap now too. And Beat is out, so ignore that. And then Walker Kessler looks like a really, really good low-end play that is going to – I mean, I don't see how he doesn't get overlooked at this point. And at 6.7K, he's too cheap against the Hornets. He projects very well. A lot of other guys to like here, but who's your favorite up top? And then who do you like in that Walker Kessler range?
It's going to be Wemby at the top. I think the field's going to be there, though. He's going to be super chalk on this slate with all the value we have now. I do the Towns all like Philly without Embiid and without Drummond is not a big lineup. Towns is going to feast against them, I would think. Towns is also questionable with a thumb injury, so it's worth noting.
Of course he is.
I assume he'll play, but you never know. The Hawks guys, again, like there has to be usage to go around for these guys. Okongwu and Capella are both still cheap. Wouldn't play them together, but I think it might be more viable tonight than it otherwise would be. Like there could be overlap with them. They've done that in the past. Like last year, they did a little bit. I think in the mid-range, Mark Williams is someone I'd have my eye on against Kessler. Like I know it's not an elite matchup for bigs against Utah, but Williams has been insanely productive. He's only 6'1". The minutes have been trending in the right direction. I think as a low-owned tournament play, Mark Williams is pretty interesting. I don't think we mentioned Gafford, but he was also shaping up to be mega chalk without Lively at 4,300 starting for Dallas. It's not super likely that he goes from like 24 to 30 minutes without Lively, but it's possible. And the matchup against New Orleans with Yves Missi at center is fine. On the flip side, Missi is okay without Zion. He looks a lot better, like we've talked about before. Isaac, you can play. Giannis, you can play. Porzingis is still a little bit cheap. There's just way too much to like at center, and I feel like Okongwu is going to be pretty chalky now.
Yeah, but that feels borderline trappy. I mean, he's still cheap enough that it wouldn't matter. Like he's probably not going to do what he did last night. Would he get 20 and 20 or something like? Yeah, it was crazy. So it's just pretty unlikely for him to do that 2 nights in a row. But I agree that he remains a good play in a vacuum. Great matchup. Great price, great per minute guy, and he should have more usage than usual. So, I mean, I wouldn't play him, demanding him to get 60 fantasy points, but at that price, he only needs to get you like 35 or 40 to feel like a really, really good hit. I think Missi is pretty good here. The minutes projection doesn't look great, but no Zion, so I would imagine he'd get. I wouldn't be shocked if that. I would bet the over on that. I would imagine he can get like 32 to 35 minutes in this spot potentially. So I don't think him or like Rudy or like any of these guys are priorities, but I do think they're interesting tournament plays because the top centers are going to get ownership. It's just that's the way it is. Down we go. Yeah, Gafford would probably be my favorite punt here at 4.3K. Not really going to mess with the Utah bigs probably. You had mentioned Wendell Carter before at 4.5. Those guys are all fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, not seeing anything else that stands out like that I have to play on this slate. Just a lot of options, no doubt about it. All right, speaking of that, let's wrap it up with our flag plant of the day and our general strategy.
I guess I'll flag plant Jalen Green. I feel like he wasn't going to be owned enough, and he certainly won't be now that we have this obvious stars and scrubs build. But you can still do a stars and scrubs build and afford Green in the mid range. Like you can still get Wemby and LaMelo and Jalen Green if you want. Just requires some of this Hawk stuff, some of the Orlando stuff, and maybe San Antonio, but very easy to do. I'm not really sure a balanced build is viable. Like I always like the idea of a balanced build, but on this slate, I'm not sure that's really the best way to approach it. But I still think Jalen Green is too cheap and too low owned for the role he plays without Jabari and Tari Smith.
Yeah, I think what I'm starting
Eason, Jabari Smith.
I think what I'm starting to prefer is something in the middle. Like I think Stars and Scrubs is very, very viable on this slate. You could certainly go get Giannis and Jokic, and then I think just probably somebody at like 10K. My math isn't mathing, but I think you can certainly go like 3 high-level studs here and stretch yourself super thin if you want to. I think the more palatable approach is to go get 2 studs and then like a lower mid-range guy like a Jalen Green, or just prioritize, 1 mega stud over 11K, and then your second stud is, in the 8 or 9K range. My point being, though, I don't think I want to go just like do what everybody else is probably going to do, which is probably going to be Jokic Wemby. I think I would just pick one.
I think Wemby LaMelo is going to be what everyone does.
That's possible. But I mean, if that is the chalk, I don't really mind doing that. But if I'm going to roll out a lot of lineups, my flag plant would be to get a little bit different, and Cat at center is probably my favorite way to do that. I think you also mentioned like Tatum as a good GPP play. That would also be another way to do it. And then Banchero is also an interesting way to do it at 9.1K too. But overall, like, trust the projections. Like that is really what leads to success most of the time. It's like when we get a little bit too cute and think we have to do this or that to get really different. And I think one of the main strategies for me on this slate is to not try to force it too much. I think in a couple spots we can look at like 2 studs like Tatum and Cat that are probably not going to be very owned, but it project for a 50 plus fantasy points. Like we can go out of our way to go target them in a few spots. But other than that, I would not really be aggressive about ownership on this slate. All right, that is going to do it.
I agree about trusting projections in general, but just a word of caution, like certain situations are super hard to project, like Philly last night and Atlanta tonight. Like there's not a large sample over the last 2 seasons with Trae Young, DeAndre Hunter, Jalen Johnson off the floor for Atlanta, and DeJounte Murray, who was there last year. So like, it's pretty much educated guesswork. The minutes is also guesswork. Like this is a completely unprecedented situation for this team. The matchup being what it is makes them viable, and someone's going to get there. But just because someone projects like a god doesn't mean that it's a lock in this kind of situation. Like I feel good about Daniels and Krejci and Bogdanovich and Matthews and Roddy, but someone's going to fail, I assume, in this situation.
Certainly it could be Keaton Wallace if he even does in fact start. Yeah, it's true. I mean, projections are, an educated guess in general to some extent. It's just they're not always going to 100% be correct, or every guy that looks awesome is not always going to hit. There's so many variables that go into it: fouls, injuries, blowouts, like whatever. There's just so much extra stuff that you have to consider. But yeah, hopefully that points you in the right direction. There are a lot of ways to go on the slate. This is not a regular slate, I think, where like there's a very clear path, which is kind of exciting because, again, I don't think ownership is going to be a major dictator for what I do on this slate. But if you want more help as we get closer, because more shit's going to hit the fan, more news is going to drop, join our Discord. We go live in chat from 5:30 to 6. And we will be looking to push out established, finalized core plays as well. And all of that can be had for free. So definitely join us there. Like this video and subscribe to the channel if we're helping you out in any way. And if you want to express your gratitude even further, you can hit the super thanks below this video and donate to the channel to help the community grow. All right, thanks for watching and good luck.